Mike Lorenz. He is a partner at Cohen and Company. You're a tax expert. How in the heck do you do it? You must love to read the small print of documents.
Well, like it or not, you're going to read the small print, and there's lots of it coming out fast and furious.
Oh my goodness gracious. I will say sometimes like it makes your head spin for a regular individual to try to figure out the tax world because it's a language all of its own.
Absolutely, we speak our own language, and even at that, there's just so much change so rapidly that it's hard to keep up with the new language of what's happening next.
I know for some people, such as ourselves, when Trump, gained office and we went to do our taxes, boy, it was a wake up call because you weren't planning for some of those changes early on. So, if we can dive into the conversation, what advice do you give to people right now, regular people, but also small businesses, as we're continuing to navigate the pandemic?
Well, you nailed it. When President Trump came in, there was really big tax changes. So there was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 17, and then the CARES Act that have come in with the coronavirus, and you multiply that with the PPP loans, and all of a sudden you have a massive amount of information coming at people. The current tax laws are generally very favorable to small businesses and to uh, transactions. So the conversation that we're having is to try and understand what is likely to be the tax law next year. So not only are we trying to digest the CARES Act and TCJA, but we're trying to read tea leaves and figure out what will happen in January. And knowing what we think will happen in January, what do we have to do between now and the end of the year to plan for that?
Did anyone tell you that when you decided to go into this area that you were going to have to uh, be like a fortune teller and be able to read tea leaves?
It was really never one of the job descriptions that I never took that class, but it really would have been helpful. Um,
Right?
and
So, what advice do you
absolutely.
have for people?
Well, there's two thoughts going on. Candidate Biden has a very specific plan that he's put out there that we can look at and understand how it'll impact everyone. President Trump's plan is less transparent in this particular case. It's mostly extend the current Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, make it permanent if possible, potentially lower capital gains even more. And there's been discussion about a middle class tax cut because the perception of his previous tax acts is they had a greater impact on high net worth individuals. So there is conversation that if President Trump is reelected, in addition to expanding the current favorable tax environment, he will provide some more relief for middle income people.
When you're looking at all of this on a day to day basis, how are you even trying to explain this to your clients? Because there are so many different factors, and businesses and individuals want certainty. And this is such an uncertain time.
That is the huge problem. Is you're absolutely right. Individuals as well, but business decisions usually are on a longer term basis, and certainty is very valuable. There is no certainty right now, so most of my clients are creating A and B plans, and they're saying if this, if we have Trump, we're going to do this. If we have Biden, we're going to do that. So there is time between the election and when a law will be passed to implement strategies. For instance, a couple of Mr. Biden's proposals are to increase the capital gain rate up to 39.6%. Well, that certainly would incent people to sell their businesses this year rather than last year. So for people that are looking at considering selling, there'll be a lot of transactions between now and December 31st if Mr. Biden's elected, because the tax rate will go up so substantially. So everyone that's considering selling a building or an investment that they have or their stocks, there'll be a lot going on in December if Mr. Biden's elected. The same can be said for very high net worth families. It's a very favorable environment to transfer wealth today. Under Mr. Biden, that will change dramatically, and the ability to step up the basis of assets of death and to transfer um, large amounts of money, people with $10 and $20 million, to their families tax free will go away. So on election day, or whenever the election's decided, who knows what that will be, how many days after the election, people will be looking at adjusting when they sell businesses and when they transfer wealth.
Similarly, there, on that note, Mike Lorenz, partner at Cohen Company, um, for individual taxpayers, what are you suggesting for them as they're navigating this? Is it similar to what you're suggesting to business owners to have an A plan or a B plan, or is it more in preparation for what may need to be additional documentation or additional regulations that could be in place that they need to be aware of as they talk to their financial institution, their maybe a CPA that they go to for taxes, or as they're preparing to file their taxes through a free service well after the election is certified?
So I break individuals down into two classifications: high net worth, which will be significantly impacted by the Biden plan, and middle income, or the rest of us, if you will, that Mr. Biden's plan is generally not going to be adverse to. Potentially, it'll be helpful. So he's talked about expanding the dependent care credit, increasing the child tax credit, providing first-time homebuyers credit, incentives for renewable energy. So middle income are probably ambivalent on the tax code between the Biden plan and the Trump plan, except for Biden's plan has a significant impact on businesses, which may impact everybody, high income, net income. So business corporate taxes are going to go up from 21 to 28%, and there'll be a minimum tax on large corporations who, on their financial statements, show $100 million of income. All those things may have an impact on the economy and how and hiring. So very hard to advise people, figure out what position of the economy will be least impacted if there's a slowdown. So part of taxes is not just revenue to the government, but incentives for making the economy succeed. Some people may be impacted by how these tax changes impact their outlook from a job perspective. For instance, if you're in the oil and gas industry, Mr. Biden's saying he may not incent that. Whereas if you're in the renewable energy industry, you'll be incented. So there could be impacts on where people look for jobs, but I don't think there'll be significant impact on middle income tax rates.
There are so many different facets to the world, depending on the leader, our elected leaders that are sitting in office making some of these decisions for the regular person. And they think they want to go it alone and try to use some of these online services. What is your advice to them?
I guess it depends on how complicated the problem is. So if it's a relatively straightforward question, online services are great. They can provide really useful information. There's the beauty of your industry, the communications and industry, is you are putting out as an industry lots of helpful information on blogs, websites, broadcasts like this one. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity for people to educate themselves at a very low cost by reaching out to all the accessible information. On the other hand, some like tax preparation is very complicated, and to do that by hand, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it anymore because every time you make a slight change, there's huge impacts throughout the return. So actually, from a tax preparation standpoint, I don't think it's practical without software.
It's a crazy world that we live in right now, and every year when those tax codes change, I would imagine sometimes people in your industry are just kind of shaking your head because you're constantly having to learn and to adapt, which I will say the one thing in this pandemic and the COVID craziness, it's forcing all of us to do right now if you're a small business owner and this year has been like no other, what advice do you have to them, especially the ones that have had to, you know, close down for so many months and then reopen at half of the capacity, such as restaurants or the smaller businesses such as that?
So many of those, there's several issues there. There's the business advice of how do we model, how do we pivot to a structure that allows for profitability. So if you're down to 25% volume, how can you adjust your cost structure to make a profit? From a tax perspective, there's if I had a net operating loss, can I carry it back and generate a refund from prior years? So the bad news is you had a really bad bump in the business. If you can restructure and become profitable in the future, that can be by carrying back losses and getting a tax refund. Additionally, most of my clients right now are focusing on the PPP loan and figuring out how to make sure that they get, because many small businesses qualified, how to make sure that they will get full forgiveness of that loan. And actually, I'm doing a seminar tomorrow on helping small businesses apply for forgiveness on their loan and the pros and cons of that, and what are the risks and issues. And there are tax issues there as well. Government has taken the position that the payments made for wages based on the PPP loan are not deductible. That creates a tax issue. What year? This year, next year, the year it's forgiven? Those are all issues that, tax issues that are being addressed right now by small businesses as they try and navigate their forgiveness applications.
There was so much confusion on some of the loans that came out during the pandemic, especially for the businesses, that I think when they passed the PPP loans, it was expected that some of these businesses would be open in a month or two, and then they couldn't bring their employees back, so they couldn't use the loans because they couldn't use it to pay employees who wouldn't come back. And then when they reopened, you had employees who didn't want to come back because they were making more money on unemployment. So that has just created such a nightmare for so many of these small businesses. And I think it's great that you're doing a seminar to help navigate this crazy world right now. Is there still room for that seminar? Is it going to be a virtual event?
Yeah, it's a virtual event, and certainly my office can send a link for anyone that would like to still sign up.
How do they get that information quickly, Mike?
I can send it to you. I'm not sure if you have a way to get it out to the audience.
Yeah, if you send that to us, then later today what we'll do is when we post this interview, we'll put the link with it as well. Because there are so many small businesses out there that are struggling right now to try to figure out exactly how they're going forward as well, because they're, potentially facing yet another shutdown if we go back down into phase 3. But if they got these loans, were they grants? Are they forgivable? Are they not forgivable? But also, how is that
What
going?
documentation do you need? When should I file? All of those are important questions for all small business.
Yeah, it's and do you and I would recommend of any year, which is so hard because businesses have already lost money, but this is not going to be the year for you not to invest in getting someone with an expertise such as yours and people in your industry to help you with your taxes. This is not the year to try to go it alone.
It would be a tough year. It's as you said, tremendous amount of reading and a tremendous amount of change. And you were right when you started the interview that, socially we've had a tremendous amount of change, all of us, just to adapt to the new world order, meeting on a video Zoom like this rather than in person in your studio. All those changes, they're difficult to adapt to, and keeping up with the level of changes, particularly if there's a change in the election, there's just not enough time to study it all, even though it may be out there. Not enough time to study it all. It's much easier if you have a coach.
Mike Lorenz with us. He's a partner at Cohen Company, joining us on the Oakland County MegaCast. Mike, just another couple minutes with you today before we have to say goodbye, and before we let you go, any lasting advice to individuals and to businesses as they continue to navigate financially COVID-19 and prepare themselves for tax season, or just anything else that we haven't spoken on today that would be important for people in the general public to know regarding their financials or regarding taxes and preparation for that in the coming year?
Well, I guess it was a long time ago. I was a Boy Scout, and the be prepared is the motto. And I think that's as accurate of a motto I can provide anyone today. So as much as you can be prepared for what could happen, and that means an A, a B, and maybe a C plan, both for operating your business, for funding your business, for managing future cash flow of the business. You know, how do you make it if the worst case scenario is there is another surge? What are the alternative plans, and how do you manage cash flow? Because at the end of the day, if you can keep your cash flowing while you're pivoting to a new profitable model, your business will be successful.
And with that, Mike, quickly, are there times where it makes more financial sense for businesses to go ahead and call it quits?
Well, if you're losing money and you're at risk for the loss, we have to look at that and say, how deep do I want to go? I've signed personal guarantees. I've put up my house. I've put up all these things, and I don't see a way forward. Yeah, I think you should limit losses at some point. Many clients, though, have a possibility of investors that are involved and maybe non recourse debt. So there's less risk in them trying to pursue a restructuring strategy. In the last recession, obviously restructuring and bankruptcy were solutions that helped business that accumulated too much debt restructure and get out of debt so they could be successful. At the end of the day, you have to have an underlying fundamental deliverable that the market wants to pay for. If you can't make money doing anything, you should stop. You're just burning money. But if you think you can, and it's simply an investment into perfecting that new deliverable, I would not give up. I would plow forward and minimize my risk where I could. Try not to be on personal guarantees. Try not to take losses that you can't recover either from either a tax NOL or some other future tax benefit. But if you believe that your business ultimately will be profitable, I wouldn't say it's time to give it up at all.
So many hard decisions for business owners, especially the small business owners who don't have the resources to hire experts to help navigate this crazy world right now, and also how to cash in on some of the grants and programs that the government is offering. But Mike, it's always great hearing from you. Thank you so much for the advice and the expertise and sharing that knowledge with us here on the Oakland County MegaCast.
My pleasure. Have a great day.